I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write for the New York Times.
And I'm Elizabeth's sidekick, Peter Marks. Welcome
Love
to another...
hear that. Love to hear that, Peter.
That's how I feel, Elizabeth. Welcome to another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, the podcast that measures the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd.
The podcast that all theater all the time. We live it, we breathe it, we wake up thinking about it, we go to bed thinking about it.
So true. Even though I don't review anymore, I still think about it.
Maybe even more. Because now
maybe.
you don't, but now it's less work.
Indeed. Yeah, it's not homework anymore.
Right.
And to that end, we've got more great talk for you today, this time with a veteran American playwright who is beloved of actors and audiences alike. The name is Richard Nelson, author of a bevy of wonderful works over the years, the Apple Family plays, you may have seen either online or in the theater, the Gabriels, Election Year in the Life of One Family, all done with some wonderful actors. And going further back, James Joyce's The Dead, a musical for which he won the Tony for Best Book, Some Americans Abroad, Goodnight Children Everywhere, and on and on. A version of Uncle Vanya he directed a few years ago at Hunter College with J.O. Sanders as Vanya was simply stunning.
So Richard is going to talk about some of these plays today, and they are performed around the world. I seem to remember Marion Plunkett was talking about performing either the Gabriels or the Apples, one of those in Asia. They were touring there, which is, of course, a fantastic experience, I think, for actors and audience alike. And in fact, today, Richard is talking to us from Paris, where one of his plays is being rehearsed. But this is all good, but today we're going to focus on a very unique project that he directed earlier this year in Kyiv, yes, the capital of Ukraine, where he was, working on theater when he wasn't spending time in bomb shelters.
Yeah. No, and he recently published his journal about the more than 2 months he spent in Kyiv in the spring. It's called A Diary of War and Theater, Making Theater in Kyiv, published by Wordville. It's an account of staging a production of Conversations at Tusculum, one of his earlier plays, in Ukrainian, with a cast of Kyiv actors with a revered Kyiv company.
So Richard is going to talk to us about his decision to travel to Kyiv and immerse himself in a production there at a time when personal safety was as much a concern as professional impact.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I've read the diary, and it's a wonderfully observed day-by-day, step-by-step digest of an extraordinary undertaking, one you can't imagine many Americans, let alone American playwrights, attempting at this time. So it really is special and a joy to bring Richard on to discuss it all. Hello, Richard. Can you take us through a little bit, Richard, of this experience in terms of how this came about at this incredibly challenging time in history? And what prompted both this journey and the selection of this piece?
It's a bit of a tale.
I'm sure.
To tell. During the pandemic, I decided to write a play that I've been researching and working on for a long time, which had a bunch of Russian characters, based in sort of Russian theater history. And I reached out to Lev Dodin, wonderful director, who knew my work and we had connections. And I told him about this project and he was excited. And so I wrote the play and I sent it to him and he was excited and wanted me to come right away in the middle of the pandemic to St. Petersburg. And so I did, and I came with Larissa Volokonsky, who is a great Russian. She and her husband, Richard Bavir, are two of the most esteemed translators of Russian literature into English today. And Larissa translated my play into Russian, and so she came with me, and she's from St. Petersburg. And while I was there, someone in the theater said, "Hey, I read this play of yours called Conversations in Tusculum. And, reading it, I thought, this really should be done in Russia," until I read the last line. And I said, then we can't do it in Russia. Right. And so, that made a real impression because I hadn't thought about the play for a long time. And so the play didn't work out with Lev. We had a great time and continued to be friends. And I took it to another director in Moscow, and he wanted to do it, and so it was all set up. And on February 23rd, 2022, and they had the first reading of the play. I was there, and the next day, Russia invaded Ukraine.
Wow.
And the moment that happened, because my play was now gone after being done in Russia, I felt I wanted to do something, and this conversation came back. Conversations in Tusculum. So I thought I would do it still do it in Russian with Russian actors at a Russian-speaking theater outside of Russia. And Larissa and I reached out to all sorts of theaters in the Baltic countries, in Israel, Georgia, and none of them really bit, but they all had interest. They didn't quite know what they wanted. And Larissa happened to meet a Ukrainian actor in Paris, where she lives, showed him the play, gave him the play. He took it back to Kyiv, and then they contacted me with interest in doing the play, and so and do it in Ukrainian, not in Russian. So that's how it got there.
But was it always part of the project that you would go there? Or did you did you think, oh, well, I'll give the instruction? I mean, I don't know. Did you feel like you had to be there?
I thought I would go just as the playwright. And it wasn't until a Zoom call with Bodan Benyuk, the artistic director, where he said, would I come? Because it would actually make a statement, I thought, is what he was saying, by my being there. And so I went from thinking I was going to go there for a few days to 9 weeks. And so, and that became the journey. And for the diary, people kept on saying, you got to keep a diary. So I that's what I did.
Were you scared?
No, I wasn't. I mean, there's like 1 or 2 moments there. There was a little jar. There's a moment. Many air raid warnings, and I've spent a lot of time in the shelter, either in the hotel or the basement of the hotel, or in the theater, which their lobby was underground, so the lobby itself became the shelter. So only once, and on my phone, and I still get these. They send out warnings, go to shelter, and then they say it's all over. And you leave. But once I was literally just Zooming with a friend on a Monday morning, and I just suddenly heard the siren go off out in the city, but not on my phone. And immediately there was a big bang, and you could feel it. And so that's when I hurried and went, whoa, this is different. And this is a different kind of missile that it comes very fast, as I learned. But I wasn't these, Kyiv's a live city. The restaurants are full, the theaters are packed, people are moving about like crowds of people in the street. And you watch these people live their lives, and you watch these people make their art, and it's an extraordinary, empowering, incredible experience.
Oh, I was going to also say before we went on, I don't know if that's a spoiler alert, Richard, but we should tell them what that last line of the play is that made it unproducible in St. Petersburg.
He was, the play is about the summer before the Ides of March in 45 BC outside of Rome, and the last line is he must die. So
right.
That's what they couldn't say, obviously.
But do you think, is that, have you had interest in the US to do it? It seems...
No, I haven't.
No?
No. There's been a group of people that they did a reading of it in England in just in the past 2 months, feeling the same reason, that there's some kind of a immediacy to the play. When we had the screening
at the public
that you were at, Peter, that some of the reactions I got back were like, whoa, this is about today, but it's about today because of what's happened in the last few weeks. So
Yeah.
But I'm curious, Richard. Well, first of all, it does seem even more directly connected to what's happening than even we've sort of alluded to, because it is so much built around the idea of how do we get rid of this dictator? How do we neutralize what's happening to this conqueror who's now turned into an autocrat? And the parallels are stunning, really. And that segue from another play in Russia to this one in Kyiv seems, wildly unique in terms of how theater can mirror the world and galvanize an audience that in the most unlikely way.
I mean, absolutely. It's quite an extraordinary tale of things having things finding a meaning. The times connect to things and disconnect from things, and this time it seems very connected. Especially because for me the play is about people almost deluding themselves. Coming to the point where they think, oh, I think we can manage this person. Or, hey, it's not the person really, it's the people around the person. And therefore, if we can just get in there, we'll change all that.
Wow.
Now, you see this, you open the paper every day right now.
Right.
And that's what you hear.
And totally.
That discussion is endless. And it's so fascinating that it's just, that's what the play is. And I think it is of today right now.
What was it like what was it like working on a play in a language I assume you don't understand?
No.
And you're in Paris right now. So what is the experience like working at that slight remote? Do you go through a translator? Like how like concretely first, how is it organized, and then like how?
Concretely, fortunately, before I went to Ukraine, I directed the play that I wrote for Russia ended up being done in Paris at the Théâtre du Soleil.
Oh,
and
oh.
Translated by Ariane Minushkin. She loved it, and
wow.
So I directed it with her company. Only the second time she's ever asked another director to direct a company.
Amazing.
Wow. Okay, it's really rare for her to relinquish her grip on that company.
It was, and it was an incredible experience because I lived in the theater, literally, as does she. So it seems,
Wait, were you also like helping with like serving food and taking tickets and all that stuff she does?
No, I didn't have to do that. But I watched, the actors will clean the bathrooms, and my bathroom I had a stall in the public bathroom. They locked, and they gave me a screwdriver that I could unscrew it to make it mine. And it had a little sign, Richards, to toilet. So no, it was absolutely extraordinary experience. So, but anyway, I don't speak French. I'm in France. I don't speak French. At least I know the alphabet, unlike in Ukraine.
Right.
And so I had when I went into it, I didn't know what it would be like. First in Paris. And what I learned very soon, I had a translator with me at my side, and we were a very good translator. Understood the theater, from the theater, wonderful actors. And many of my actors did not speak English in Paris, so some of them did, so that would sort of help. But I wondered, would I be able to understand? Would I be able to convey what I wanted? Would I know if they were doing what I wanted them to do or trying to get them to do? And I learned right away that I could. I learned that I could tell if they were being truthful, if they were really talking to each other, really listening to each other, if what I was set up to really, the conversation I was after was really taking place. And that was a surprise. That was thrilling. And I had the script in English and French right in front of me, so I was so that was a start. And I've took high school French and things like that, so there was a little bit of help and things. Going to Ukraine was completely different initially because I don't know the alphabet. It's really, and none of my actors spoke English. So I had a translator, and we worked, and it wasn't long before I felt the same thing. Initially, it was hard to, what are they thinking? What's going on? And the world they're in, there's a war, so many things happening there. But I really felt I could figure out, I could convey. And it ended up that the work that you saw, Peter, was extremely different than what they're used to doing. Just like at the Soleil. The Soleil is not at all working the same way as I work. And because my work is so centered on actors, both at the Soleil, their company, and at the Theater on Portal, that they really loved. Eventually, once they learned to trust it, they really loved working this way because it empowered the actors so much in a world where a director's theater or a theater working to define itself through a visual vocabulary is leaves the actor in a different place than where I put the actor.
We should explain to listeners, if you aren't familiar with what Richard is describing as his style of theater, it's very pared down. It's very focused on realistic conversation of people listening to each other intensely and responding, sort of, eschewing some of the theatrical impulses that actors have, the histrionic side, the larger dramatic impulses. And if you've seen them, especially the Apple family plays or the Gabriels, they're all centered around a table, a meal. That really sets up that notion of people just getting together. And I saw this film version at the public of the Kyiv production, and it starts very much like the Apple family plays. The actors come in and they set the table because it really is about about Cassius and Brutus et al. Just sitting around having conversations, as the title describes. So I wondered, though, I don't know how one communicates all that through a translator to actors who have a whole other training, or all their impulses. How frustrating was it to get them to the point where they did do exactly what you're describing, as I saw it in the film?
Well, it wasn't so much frustrating. It just took time and patience. Because once they understood where I wanted to go and how I wanted to empower them, they of course wanted to go in that direction because it's a fantastic place for an actor. Now, what I would have to explain is that they immediately would say, "Oh, this is naturalism. You want some form of naturalism," and I would say, "No. It's not what I mean. Naturalism is a form that tries to recreate, something, reality, recreation of reality. I'm looking for something that's actually happening, that's absolutely true, that we're in a space with the audience, we the actors say, with the audience, and in which, in front of that audience, something real is happening. Something truthful is happening. Someone is really talking and someone is really listening, and they need to talk and they need to listen. And let's watch that. That's why my shows don't have any set, because I'm not interested in set. It's why they come in and set up the furniture, as they did not only in Kyiv, but also at the Soleil. They set up the furniture because it's a complete and direct acknowledgement that we're in the theater and we're going to put on a show. So it's not, that's the opposite of naturalism or realism. And it's not, and then we start to talk about, it's like being in a film. It's like talking like that. I said, no. Film acting is another kind of style. Often it's a sort of a pretend style of twitches and things and trying to be real in a kind of a mannered way, where this is not that. And so I would watch, and when they felt it, as my actors in the Apples or the Gabriels or the Michaels, when they felt listening to each other, for an actor, it's an incredible joy time goes by in 2 seconds. A whole 2 hours can go by. It seemed like 10 minutes for them because it's just off of each other. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. So it's in both cases, besides my own actors in New York, but in both the Soleil and in Kyiv, I felt like I released something, and my conversations with them since have been just, fantastic. Just how much this has opened them up, which is why Ariane wanted me to come, because this was something she felt in my work. She'd seen my work a number of times, and that I could something for their actors.
Very cool.
It's the same reason why when I did the Apple Family plays, we ended up touring them to Europe. It was because Thomas Ostermeyer from the Schaubühne came to see him, and he said, I want to bring these plays because I want my actors to see them.
Fabulous.
It's interesting, too, because those are two directors whose own styles feel so far from yours. And I love that they understand what you're doing. Because on paper, if you talk about Nushkin and Ostermeyer, yes, completely different from what you do. But there's a friend of mine from Paris was visiting, and I took her to one of the Apple plays at the Public when they were there. And she sees a lot of theater in Paris. And the first thing she said afterwards, I said, oh, what did you think? And she said, the acting, it was so real. It was really it really threw her.
Really? That's interesting.
Because, in France, especially in theater acting, there's such importance on scansion and the rhythm of the line. And even if it's not, if it's prose, it can be modern. It's just so built in that you have this kind of way of, they can't help themselves. It's just this kind of declaiming that feels theatrical, even if it's not, even if it's meant, So I would be so curious to see how you got that of the French actors. The Ukrainian actors I don't know as well, but I know how French actors function, and that to me would be such a challenge.
It both was and it wasn't, because I think you sit around a table in a conversation, and they're not declaiming, they're not acting in French. So you just work from there. You work from those places where you're just you're really talking to one another over a table or where, and say, let's find that. Let's find that.
I just want to go back to the idea that in the midst of all this, bombs are falling. You have to, you describe in your diary almost a daily ritual of alerts at all hours of the day and night. You're up many nights through the night, sitting in a bomb shelter, sometimes by yourself. You have even performances interrupted by alerts. How do you find the continuity and the focus to be able to produce something as that really speaks to you as an artist in the midst of all this?
Well, that's so much them, isn't it? I mean, they're the ones who stop in the middle of a performance, will go to a shelter and come back, and they continue the performance. They are the ones who we go off into in the middle of a rehearsal, we go into the shelter, and then we continue rehearsing we put some chairs and stuff and continue rehearsing.
Amazing.
In the shelter without any doubt, any worry or any self-questioning. This is how they live their lives. And this is what they do. It's a theater that has over 40 productions in rotating rep. One of my actors was in 5 different plays in 1 week. Unbelievable.
That is incredible.
And how are they doing this? They're focused. And, I asked them at the end, I asked them a question and said, why are we working so hard? I meant really them working so hard. Is it is it in spite of the war or because of it? And the answer was certainly because of it. It was a way of dealing with the war. And so you found that passion, you found that drive, and not one iota of self-pity or poor me or anything. They are strong people. I learned much, when when the morning after our recent election, I was complaining to one of my friends in Kyiv, and she wrote back. She said, "In every bad thing, there's something good."
Mm.
And I said, we need a little Ukrainian strength right now. I think
So true.
This would help.
Oh, I've got chills. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that's taken note of in the diary also is the fact that people said that theater was incredibly important right now to them, maybe even more important than before the war. And I wondered how what you think of that.
Well, first off, I was surprised, and when I learned that this was the case for young people, especially for young people. And when I went and talked to a big class at a drama school, I asked them why this was, and they said one surprising thing. They said they wanted to learn more about their culture, Ukrainian culture,
Mm.
and they saw the theater as a way for that.
Fascinating.
That was really the other reason seemed to be they wanted to be together, do something together. So I think I think the theater it's many things. It brings people together. It's strangers together, sharing something. I think it's an opportunity to feel like you have a special. Your Ukrainian language has a special place. It has its own place. I mean, there's an incredible history. I can tell you, I'm going back to Kyiv on December 31st for another 10 weeks to do a new play that I wrote for them.
Wow.
And it's about this subject. In 1920, a man named Les Kurbas, who was the father of the modern Ukrainian theater, but he was a young man, and he brought a group of young actors into the farmlands, countryside, well south of Kyiv. And he did that because there was a famine in Kyiv in the middle of the Civil War. And it will put on productions. And one production they put on was Macbeth. And this was the very first time any Shakespeare play had ever been performed in Ukrainian. 1920. And why is that? Because the Russians wouldn't allow it. The Russians would not allow Ukrainian spoken on the stage except in folk dramas or very, very farcical, low comedies, because that's all the language they said it was good for. So to find out, hear their voice, hear their culture, the theater, it becomes a real center for that and a real necessary place.
Well, you just mentioned actually, going back. So how do you feel? Because you've talked about like working with the actors, like how was working with them? What was the effect on you as a writer to be there and work with these people in Ukraine and in France?
Well, one, my heart never left Ukraine, or Kyiv when I came home, and so I decided I wanted to write a play. The subject of this play I learned about while I was in Kyiv, talking to people in the museum. I think it made me feel, just being there, and also to be at the Soleil for a somewhat different reason. It made me feel that what I was doing had purpose, mattered. That theater, which is how I grew up, theater was a part of society, an integral part of society, and a culture and a country, and so that made me want to keep that up, to make that connection, continue to see how far. What if I were to write a play about Ukraine, Ukrainian history, with all Ukrainian characters? That would be a real risk for me, a real gamble, but a very exciting one. And so, at a time when, for me, our theater is at a very unfortunate state. Commercialism is rampant. Just it's crazy. I can't. You guys get to go to the theater for free, but I can't. And it's I can't afford to go, and not even if I wanted. But it's things are just too expensive. Nonprofit theater is almost too expensive. It's so you're losing an audience, you're losing the importance. People are going for reasons that to justify the expense, blah, 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 all those things we all know so well. So here was an opportunity, a place where theater was actually functioning in a very a deep, meaningful, purposeful way, and that's what I came home with, and I'm going back with.
It strikes me, Richard, and what you're saying is that this sense of unity that Ukraine is seeking, that search for that sense of common identity, is almost the opposite of what has happened in American theater to a large degree, where the tribalism has really spawned, very specific groups being, interested in certain topics and not wanting to jump to the other side and look. We almost are fragmenting as this other culture under duress is trying to come together, and how perfect as a vehicle theater is for that purpose. Certainly.
In the play that I wrote for Russia that I did at the Soleil, it was about the Moscow Art Theater Tour in America in 1923. And so Stanislavski is a character. And it's a big dinner party they're having. Surprise, surprise. It's a mall play. and he says at one point, he says to his actors, he says, what we do, he says, is that we see ourselves in others and others in ourselves. That is what theater can do. The moment you take away the moment you take away the opportunity, the possibility of seeing ourselves in others and others in ourselves, then you don't have theater anymore. It's not theater. It's something else. So you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Tribalism does not belong in what the theater event is.
Well, ideally, that would be how we think about life itself, because that's how you learn to live with other people.
Yes.
Who may not be like you or think like you or look like you, but, we're far from there.
We're far from that, but that is what the theater's function, purpose in a society can be. You go into the theater with a group of strangers, you hear as one, and you see yourself in others and others and ourselves. And that's. At the Soleil, for example, I had 11 actors, and they were from all over the world.
What play are you doing there? What play are you doing in Paris?
Oh, and right now? No. Right now, I'm not doing a play. I'm here working on a translation with Larissa Valakatsky and Richard Bevere. For the last 12 years, we spend every year I come and we work on a translation, and we're doing Gorky's The Lower Depths.
So what did you do with Minushkin? What was the play you directed at Soleil?
It was called Our Life in Art, Maurice on d'Art.
I could see how she would get into that. That is such a kind of like a few words describing her entire life.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, I wanted also to point out to listeners that Théâtre du Soleil is one of the most prestigious institutions in Paris, but ticket prices are like 40 euros or something, or maybe even less.
I think it's less, and there's all kinds of
It's like 20 or something. It makes it possible for entire families to go. So their audience is incredibly diverse.
But it's there's an understanding everywhere. I was at the Comédie Française yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
That was 45 euros, 46 euros, I think. I was at the Odeon, Seagull earlier in the week, and that was, 41 euros or something. I don't know. It's not the same. It's just not the same. And therefore, you look across and you see a lot of people in their 20s and certainly in early 30s. Sometimes people in their late teens. They're going to the theater. They're coming together to go to the theater, which we're not helping.
One last question, Richard. I imagine at the end of I remember being in college productions, and when the production was over, there was a kind of depression that set in. Just what you build and that community, that family you make, and it's gone. I wonder, are you going back because that family is now part of you? That you want to scratch that itch again, and be part of that? Something really changed for you about playmaking?
Well, yeah, I think, okay, so I was at the Soleil the other day and saw everybody. I saw a rehearsal. Ariane has a new play that's opening on Wednesday. I'll be there for that. I saw a rehearsal the other day. And I saw everybody, all my actors, and I'm going to do a little, I'm putting together a little reading of a play of mine that's in French and in English. That I'll do that next week out at the Couture. So yes, but at the same time, my play in Kyiv is in rep. It's going to be in rep for years. So it plays on, I think it's Friday or Saturday night this week. I'll write them a note, send them notes and whatever. So that's that's not, and the other thing is I wanted to show, I would have loved to have toured Conversations in Tusculum. It was my ambition to tour, and I had serious interest. The Avignon Festival was interested, and some other people were interested. When I got there, I said, hey, what about we tour this? And they went, you can't, because your two leading actors are military age. They can't leave the country.
Wow. Amazing.
So the new play has 6 young women. So they can't.
Practicalities.
Practicalities,
That's
but
great.
of course,
That's great.
this being what it is, they could be roped in as well. So
They could be. They certainly could
it
be.
could be.
Well, thank you, Richard Nelson. The lovely book that he has written about his time in the spring of 2024 in Kyiv is called A Diary of War in Theater, Making Theater in Kyiv, Spring 2024. It's published by Wordville, and you can get it at their website.
We'll include that in the notes too.
Or Amazon. It's
Or
on
Amazon. But let's give Wordville a plug here.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes. Let's link to Wordville. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
And that's another one in the bag.
Yeah, we had a little conversation with Richard just now, right after we finished taping, in which he mentioned that Peter Brook came to see his Vanya, and initially was sort of like dragged there. It sounds like this is the one he did at Hunter College, and he ended up staying afterwards and wanting to talk, and that's kind of like. That's a bragging right story,
That tells you something too, because Peter Brook has probably seen like a gazillion Vanyas
Yeah, he probably did.
and done like 100 million himself. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
like a
and,
great compliment.
that's amazing. And
Yeah.
and Richard's ability to open himself up to new experiences. This is a veteran playwright, written dozens of plays, just blows me away. He's like a kid still, He just really still has the bug, and that's sort of an inspiration to younger artists who might be listening.
Oh my God. And older one, I'm feeling like completely like jazzed up by his energy.
I know. He's got a great life.
Yeah. Okay, well, another good one, if I may say so myself. If you enjoyed this episode, please join us as one of our paying subscribers, if you haven't already. That's marksvincentelli.substack.com.
Yes, and you'll find us both on Threads and Blue Sky.
Just Blue Sky for me right now. I'm putting all my chips on Blue Sky.
Whoa,
For now.
okay,
I
well,
know. I just don't have time to check like a million places.
My eggs are in 2 baskets. So watch those spaces for news of upcoming shows and some other things we may be cooking up.
Oh yeah. All the burners are currently like on low boil.
Yes,
It's happening.
indeed.
It's happening on the ranch. Well, I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli.
And I'm Peter Marks. Please tune in next time.